Location-based app development with Azure Maps, 5 SMB use cases. Welcome back. Today's topic is location-based app development with Azure Maps, 5 SMB use cases. We'll cover what you actually need to know about location-based app development with Azure Maps.
Now, moving on to what Azure Maps gives you as a development platform. Azure Maps is Microsoft's cloud-native geospatial platform. It bundles map rendering, search, routing, traffic data, geofencing APIs, and spatial analytics into a single service with pay-as-you-go pricing. For SMB developers, the practical capabilities include: pricing runs on a transaction model. Basic map renders cost around 50 cents per 1,000 transactions. Geofencing API calls run approximately $4.50 per 1,000. For most SMBs building an internal tool or modest volume app, monthly Azure Maps costs stay well under $200. That's a meaningful difference from Google Maps platform, which charges $7 per 1,000 dynamic maps loads after the free tier. Let's talk about now, use case 1, real-time fleet and delivery tracking with Azure Maps. The problem: a logistics company or delivery startup has no live view of where vehicles are. Dispatchers call drivers for status updates, customers call dispatchers, and nothing is tracked once the order goes out. What Azure Maps enables, paired with Azure IoT Hub, each vehicle sends GPS coordinates at a set interval. The app plots live positions on a map and recalculates ETAs dynamically as traffic conditions change. The basic architecture works in 4 steps. Let's talk about moving on to use case 2, geofencing for retail triggers and customer alerts. Geofencing is the practice of defining a virtual boundary around a physical location and detecting when a device crosses it. The Azure Maps geofencing API accepts a GeoJSON polygon and a device coordinate, then returns whether the device is inside or outside the defined zone.
For retail SMBs, this maps directly to practical operations.
The trigger mechanism typically uses Azure Event Grid to subscribe to geofence events, with Power Automate handling the resulting notification logic. This means alert rules can be managed by a business user rather than requiring a developer for every change.
Next up, let's talk about use case 3, on-demand service apps and location-based dispatch. Food delivery, home cleaning, plumbing dispatch, HVAC service. All of these depend on matching a customer's location to the nearest available provider and routing that provider to the job efficiently. Location-based app development with Azure Maps gives you the spatial primitives to build this without a specialized GIS team. Building on Azure Maps for an on-demand model means: the honest answer on complexity: the mapping and routing pieces are straightforward. The dispatch logic is where most startup teams underestimate effort.
Plan 6 to 10 weeks of development for an MVP that handles the full dispatch loop reliably. Let's talk about next up, use case 4, supply chain visibility for SMB freight brokers. This use case differs from fleet tracking because the tracked asset is a shipment, not a company-owned vehicle. Freight brokers work with carrier partners who may run their own telematics systems. The challenge is pulling location data from multiple sources into a single coherent view. Azure Maps handles this through its spatial I/O capabilities. You can ingest location feeds from carrier EDI 214 feeds translated to coordinates, third-party telematics APIs pulled in via Azure API Management, or driver check-in apps built directly on the Azure Maps SDK. The result is a map view showing all active shipments, color-coded by status, with geofence triggers that fire when a truck enters a delivery terminal. If your operations team already uses Power BI dashboards for performance tracking, adding a live shipment location layer is achievable without building a separate application.
Let's talk about moving on to use case 5, location-based check-in and workforce management.
Field service companies in HVAC, pest control, property management, and security need to verify that technicians are actually on site when they clock in or log job completion.
Manual check-ins are easy to game. Location-verified check-ins are not.
Azure Maps geofencing makes this straightforward to build. This pairs well with Dynamics 365 Field Service, which already manages scheduling and work orders. Location verification becomes one step in the existing work order completion flow rather than a separate system to maintain.
Now, let's talk about Azure Maps versus Google Maps for SMB app development.
This comparison comes up in almost every location app scoping conversation.
Here's a direct look at the factors that matter for SMB builds.
For teams already running workloads on Azure, the integration story is the most important factor. Azure Maps uses the same service principles and managed identities as every other Azure service. You're not managing a separate API keychain or a second billing relationship. The honest case for Google Maps: if your team knows it well, the learning curve difference may outweigh cost savings at low transaction volumes. Once you're past 500,000 monthly map loads, Azure Maps pricing becomes meaningfully cheaper.
For startups evaluating total Azure spend, Azure Cloud Services, 5 quick wins for startups and SMBs covers where consolidating on Azure pays off fastest. Next up, moving on to how to start location-based app development with Azure Maps. Getting started with location-based app development with Azure Maps doesn't require a large team or a long setup phase. The fastest path to a working prototype.
Most developers get a working proof of concept in 1 to 2 days. The production build, covering authentication, error handling, scalability, and mobile app development, takes longer.
Budget estimates for a full location-based app MVP.
Location-based app development cost for small businesses varies considerably based on whether you need custom routing logic, native iOS and Android apps, or integrations with third-party logistics systems.
Next up, let's talk about conclusion.
Location-based app development with Azure Maps is a practical choice for SMBs that need geofencing, real-time tracking, or spatial dispatch without enterprise-level costs or a dedicated GIS team. The 5 use cases covered here, from delivery fleet visibility to technician check-in verification, share a common pattern: a geofencing or routing API call embedded in an existing mobile or web workflow, connected to Azure services you may already be running. The most common mistake teams make is scoping the mapping piece accurately but underestimating the surrounding logic, dispatch queues, notification pipelines, and mobile app authentication. Those pieces typically take more time than the map itself. Start with a 1-day proof of concept on the Azure Maps free tier. You'll learn quickly where your team is confident and where specialist support would accelerate delivery.
Ready to scope your location app?
Get in touch with our team to discuss your build.